But before we close, I want to end by talking about what we have to do. I just want you to talk about the crackdown on college campuses, including your alma maters of Princeton and Harvard Law School. I find it quite disturbing. Universities should be, sacrosanct in terms of free speech, and having covered despotic governments all over the world, once they shut down that university space, it's quite ominous.
Yes, it was made even worse by the October 7th and thereafter, where the attack on October 7th was a homicide-suicide mission. They lost 1,600 Hamas fighters, more than the alleged number of Israelis who were killed, 350 of whom were soldiers, by the way. And that was a raid into Israel that can't compare with the raids into Palestine for 60 years, slaughtering from the air all kinds of civilians and civilian infrastructures again and again and again against the defenseless population, as Gideon Levy, the columnist in Haaretz, wrote about again and again, among other columnists in that newspaper in Israel. And then the eruption of protest on college campuses, I would never have guessed the level of suppression, suspending students, discharging students, shutting down events, suspending potential grants, blocking professors from moving from one university to another, including one of the nation's leading experts on genocide, Mr. Professor Siegel from Stockton University, had a post at University of Minnesota, which was turned down because he was outspoken about the genocide in Gaza. The law schools are following suit. The law firms, some of them have announced they will not hire or they will reject job offers of law school graduates who are involved in pro-Palestinian rights activities at law school opposed to genocide. I mean, who would ever have dreamed something like that? Even critics of universities never dreamed the level of cowardliness, the level of receptiveness to a few large donors who were pro-Israeli government can do no wrong enthusiasts. And it cowed Harvard University, Princeton, and others decisively, just proving our point that at academic institutions, money talks more than truth, more than freedom of speech. And the answer to it is just better organizing on campus with smarter strategies. I wouldn't have spent all that time on disinvestment. There are other ways that can affect universities much more deeply that have to be considered. And these students need a few full-time people helping them at these large universities, because these students got to deal with classes and grades. So there needs to be more resources around, and brave faculty have to be defended. You have to have pro bono lawyers, and with the right tactics and strategies, you can tip the balance in favor of freedom of speech and developing the civic refinements for justice as part of the educational process itself.
Well, I know I want to move on to what we have to do, but I know you've talked about mobilizing alumni as kind of a key aspect of pushing back against the suppression of free speech and the suspension of students and the kind of blacklisting of those who speak out on the campus. But let's just close by, what do we do now? We are on the cusp of an American fascism. There's just no way around it. You know, reading these executive orders, everything from education to revoking student visas for foreign students who have participated in protests against the genocide. I mean, there's a long list. What do we do now to save what's left of our open society?
Well, there's a lot that has to be done in order to create the brooks that feed the streams, that feed the tributaries, that feed the Mississippi River, to take a metaphor to its limit. For example, there's nothing stopping students from organizing their own full-time groups with full-time staff. They can assess themselves 15, 20 bucks a student and do what the public interest research groups have done on domestic issues all over the country with full-time staff. We have to expand our language. We should never use words like white-collar crime. It's corporate crime. We should use words like corporatism, not private sector. We've got to organize, as you say, the progressive alumni. There's always significant percentages of progressive alumni of these schools, but they don't know each other, and that has to be connected. We've got to beef up the student press, which is very heavily on trivia and
but in a broader sense, outside of the universities.
Yeah, in a broader sense, all it comes down to are two things. Trump will self-destruct because he knows no boundaries. So his greatest enemy is Trump. And you will see the unraveling of Trump in the succeeding weeks. I would not be surprised that if he continues his bull in the china shop, illegal, wild flailing, affecting tens of millions of people in terms of their dire necessities of life in favor of his corporate supremacists, that he will be impeached and convicted in the U.S. Senate. His own party will turn against him because when they see the polls, which are already dropping since January 20th, by the way, when they see the polls and they realize it's either them or Trump, they will always take their own political survival, just as a few senators did during the Nixon Watergate scandal when they got into a limousine and went to the White House and basically said to Nixon, your time is up. You've lost your base in Congress. So the second is we've got to focus on the Congress. That is the leading fulcrum for turning around the U.S. government, foreign, domestic, and affecting state and local. That's what the founders believed when they gave the most powerful authorities by far, not to the executive branch or the judicial branch, but to Congress. The exclusive power to declare war, to exercise the taxing power, the spending power, the nomination confirmation power, and the investigative oversight authority. And so we're down to 535 men and women. Probably 20% of them are already on the side of truth and justice and peace. And we've got to organize back home. My best guess is 1% of the people organized in congressional districts, that's 2.5 million, and progressive districts who represent public opinion, who know what they're talking about, who are willing to put in, say, 500 hours a year of volunteer time, about the time people put in on a hobby, and who will raise enough money for an office with 2 full-time staff in each congressional district, can defeat the corporate supremacists and take control of Congress and turn the country around. That is quite a bit of organizing, but most people would not believe that 1% can do it. We did it in the 60s and early 70s with far less than 1% to regulate these companies. Remember, when it comes down to the brass tacks, the members of Congress want your vote far more than they want money from commercial interests. They want money from commercial interests in order to defeat their opponent, put ads on TV. Why? Because they want to get votes. But if the votes are conditioned and focused, and if members of Congress are regularly summoned to town meetings back home where the citizenry sets the agenda and asks the questions, and the senators and representatives respond and listen and go back to their instructions, the country can be changed. We should always remember that when it comes down to where people live, work, and raise their children, There are not the kind of polarizations that the rulers try to inculcate on the public. Divide and rule goes back over 2,000 years as a tactic. Most of the necessities of life are supported by an overwhelming number of Americans, regardless of the labels they put on themselves, conservative, liberal, or whatever. Living wage is one, universal health insurance is two, crack down on corporate crooks is three, a fair tax system is four, de-bloating the military budget and coming back home to repair and modernize infrastructure and public services in every community, creating a lot of jobs is five, and empowering people so they can take back their sovereign power and condition it before they give their instructions back to their senators or their state legislators or their city council person. So it's not an impossible task. It has precedence in American history, and it's surprising when people realize what a tiny percentage of active, engaged citizens representing public opinion, knowing what they're talking about, and making direct contact with town meetings with their representatives. No flacks, no intermediaries. We have all kinds of books that show how this can be done, how it has been done. One of them is called Breaking Through Power. It's easier than we think, that I wrote. And another one is called Unstoppable, the Emerging Left-Right Alliance to Dismantle the Corporate State. It's good to know history and the successes from history so we don't get discouraged and demoralized as we see so much of that today in the U.S.